First modern bank panic, 1819, led to economic downturn in the U.S. Introduction. The context leading to the panic. In the early 19th century, the United States was still a young country, recovering from the effects of the War of 1812 and grappling with the challenges of establishing a stable financial system. The period between 1812 and 1819 saw a rapid economic expansion, fueled in large part by speculation, agricultural growth, and the rise of new banking practices. However, this period of growth was unsustainable, and it all came to a head in 1819 with the first modern bank panic, a financial crisis that led to an economic downturn across the country. The 1819 panic marked the first time in U.S. history that a widespread financial panic took place, resulting in widespread bank failures, business bankruptcies, and a general economic depression. This event is significant not only for the immediate financial turmoil it caused, but also because it revealed the vulnerabilities in the nation's banking and financial systems. 1. The economic boom before the panic. The era of economic expansion. From the War of 1812 until 1819, the United States experienced an era of significant economic expansion. The post-war period saw growth in manufacturing, particularly in the northern states, and a boom in agriculture, driven by the expansion of lands in the West. The growth in agriculture, particularly the cultivation of cotton, encouraged both domestic and international trade, contributing to a rise in land speculation. During this time, the United States was also undergoing significant banking reforms. The Second Bank of the United States, established in 1816 under President James Madison, aimed to provide the country with a central national bank. It was supposed to stabilize the economy by controlling inflation, regulating the money supply, and providing credit to promote trade and industry. But the second bank's role in the economy would soon become controversial, as the nation struggled to balance growth with financial stability. Expansion of credit and land speculation. Banks in both the East and the West began to issue large amounts of paper currency and loans. These loans were often used for land speculation, as people began buying vast tracts of land in the Western territories. The idea was that as settlers moved westward and the land's value increased, the speculators could sell the land at a profit. The easy availability of credit encouraged both businesses and individuals to take on significant debt. Many banks, particularly state-chartered banks, were printing more currency than they had gold or silver to back it up, leading to an unsustainable increase in the money supply. This inflationary environment helped fuel the speculative frenzy, but also laid the foundation for economic instability. 2. The causes of the Panic of 1819. The collapse of land prices. The panic was triggered by a sudden and dramatic decline in land prices. As land speculation soared, many buyers were over-leveraged and unable to pay back their loans. The U.S. economy had become heavily dependent on the rise of land prices, and when these prices began to fall, a massive wave of defaults on loans followed. As prices plummeted, the value of land-backed banknotes collapsed, making it more difficult for banks to collect on loans or secure the value of their assets. Speculators and farmers who had borrowed money to purchase land found themselves deeply in debt, with no ability to repay. Bank failures and tightening of credit. The rapid collapse of land values led to the failure of many state-chartered banks, which had heavily invested in land loans. The Second Bank of the United States also began to tighten its credit, fearing the effects of inflation on the economy. The national bank started demanding that state-chartered banks redeem their paper money for gold or silver, further restricting credit. The result was a liquidity crisis, as banks struggled to meet the demand for gold and silver and became reluctant to lend money. This led to a credit crunch that squeezed the economy, making it difficult for businesses and individuals to borrow money or access capital. 3. The immediate effects of the panic. Bank failures and economic contraction. The first bank panic resulted in the failure of over 200 banks across the United States. This was the first time in U.S. history that a widespread, systemic collapse of financial institutions had occurred. People lost their life savings as banks closed, and the nation saw its first major economic depression. The banking system became deeply mistrusted, and people began hoarding gold and silver rather than using paper currency. In the aftermath, many banks were forced to either liquidate or consolidate. The destruction of credit had far-reaching effects, particularly on agricultural and industrial sectors that relied on loans to finance operations and expansion. Unemployment and business failures. The banking collapse led to a ripple effect through the economy. Farmers, landowners, and businesses, who were already struggling with rising debt, found themselves unable to access capital. Unemployment soared as businesses shut down, and many farmers lost their land through foreclosure. In addition, wages stagnated, and prices for goods began to rise, further exacerbating the hardships faced by the working class. 4. Political and social consequences. The role of the Second Bank of the United States. In the aftermath of the panic, there was considerable political backlash against the Second Bank of the United States. Many Americans blamed the national bank for the economic collapse, as it had contributed to the tight credit policies that exacerbated the panic. Critics of the bank, including President Andrew Jackson, argued that the bank's influence on the economy and its control over credit had destabilized the nation's financial system. This led to the bank war in the 1830s, where Jackson, in particular, sought to dismantle the Second Bank of the United States. His successful effort to do so was a critical moment in the history of U.S. financial policy and shaped the way the American banking system would function for the decades to come. Social unrest and public discontent. The panic also led to widespread social discontent. Many of the poor and working-class Americans who had been hardest hit by the crisis began to question the fairness of the system and the influence of wealthy elites. Some historians have suggested that the panic helped lay the groundwork for later populist movements that would challenge the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a few. 5. Long-term effects of the panic. A shift in U.S. banking policy. The Panic of 1819 was a wake-up call for U.S. policymakers about the dangers of unregulated banking and speculative lending practices. It highlighted the instability of the banking system and the need for a more regulated financial infrastructure. In the years following the panic, the U.S. government and the Second Bank of the United States began to work on creating a more stable banking environment. However, it would take years for the banking system to recover and for policies to be put in place that would ensure greater oversight. The growth of state banks and the rise of the independent treasury. In the aftermath of the panic, many state-chartered banks were created in an attempt to provide more localized credit and alleviate the centralization of financial power in the hands of the national bank. Additionally, the independent treasury system was established in the 1840s, which would eventually reduce the federal government's reliance on private banks and provide greater oversight and control over the nation's monetary policy. The legacy of the first bank panic. The first modern bank panic of 1819 serves as a crucial turning point in U.S. economic history. It exposed the weaknesses of a young financial system and revealed the dangers of unregulated banking practices and excessive land speculation. While the immediate effects were devastating, leading to bank closures, economic stagnation, and widespread unemployment, the panic also laid the groundwork for future reforms and a more regulated approach to banking. The economic downturn caused by the panic shaped the trajectory of U.S. financial policy for years to come and remains a stark reminder of the risks inherent in speculative booms and the need for careful economic management. Erie Canal opened. 1825 boosted trade and economic growth in the U.S. Introduction. The need for improved transportation in early America. In the early 19th century, transportation in the United States was slow and inefficient. Goods were moved primarily by horse-drawn wagons or along natural waterways, but these routes were often cumbersome and unreliable. For a rapidly growing nation, especially one with an expanding economy and a vast geographical area, the need for better transportation was becoming increasingly urgent. One of the most significant developments in addressing this challenge came in the form of the Erie Canal, which opened on October 26, 1825. This monumental project, linking the Hudson River to Lake Erie, not only transformed New York State's economy but also played a central role in reshaping the broader U.S. economy, setting the stage for future growth and expansion. 1. The vision for the Erie Canal. The idea and planning. The vision for the Erie Canal was spearheaded by New York Governor DeWitt Clinton. His ambitious goal was to create a man-made waterway that would connect the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes, opening up new markets and drastically reducing the costs of shipping goods. Prior to the canal, goods had to be transported by land, which was costly, slow, and often unreliable. The route was designed to provide a direct path for goods, especially agricultural products and raw materials, from the Midwest to the East Coast, and vice versa. Although many at the time considered the project to be an impossibly expensive and risky venture, Clinton's tireless advocacy and leadership rallied support. With his determination and the promise of economic prosperity, he was able to secure both public funding and private investment to see the project through. The construction challenge. Construction of the Erie Canal was an unprecedented engineering challenge, requiring the building of over 350 miles of canal through difficult terrain. Workers had to dig through rocky soil, carve tunnels, and construct locks to accommodate the changing elevation between the Hudson River and Lake Erie. The project also required extensive labor, which was supplied by both local workers and immigrant laborers, particularly Irish immigrants who worked in difficult and often dangerous conditions. The construction began in 1817 and took 8 years to complete, with the canal finally opening in 1825. The cost of the project was significant, amounting to around $7 million, equivalent to hundreds of millions of dollars today. While it was initially controversial, the success of the canal ultimately proved the project to be a major investment in the nation's future. 2. Immediate economic impacts. Reduced shipping costs. Once opened, the Erie Canal immediately transformed trade across the region. Before its construction, shipping goods from the Great Lakes to the East Coast or vice versa could be expensive, costing up to $100 per ton. The Erie Canal reduced these costs dramatically. By the time the canal was completed, the cost of transporting goods was reduced to just $10 per ton, a 90% reduction in shipping expenses. This made trade much more affordable and efficient. The canal allowed farmers and manufacturers in the Midwest to send their products eastward, where they could be distributed more easily and at a lower cost. Likewise, goods from the East Coast, especially finished products, could now be sent westward, providing new markets for manufacturers and creating an economic flow between the growing cities and the agricultural heartlands. Boost to New York City's economy. One of the most profound effects of the canal's opening was on the economy of New York City. The canal provided the city with a direct link to the Midwest, establishing it as the primary port of entry for goods coming from the interior of the country. This solidified New York's position as the nation's commercial hub. The canal helped to strengthen the Port of New York by funneling goods to the city from other regions, making it a central point for international trade and turning it into one of the wealthiest cities in the world. Before the canal, trade was primarily handled through Boston, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. But the Erie Canal created such a competitive advantage for New York that the city soon eclipsed all other ports in the United States in terms of both shipping volume and economic influence. 3. Long-term economic growth and development. Expansion of the U.S. economy. The opening of the Erie Canal was a catalyst for the broader economic expansion of the United States. The canal connected the agricultural regions of the Midwest with the urban centers of the Northeast, helping to establish a national market economy. As a result, the canal played a pivotal role in supporting agriculture, manufacturing, and commerce, all of which flourished as transportation and trade became more efficient and affordable. By facilitating the easier movement of goods, the canal allowed both farmers and manufacturers to expand their operations. The agricultural output of the Midwest grew, with farmers able to ship grain, corn, and other crops to eastern markets, while the industrial sector saw growth as raw materials were brought to factories on the East Coast. Expansion of settlement and population growth. The Erie Canal also had a significant impact on migration patterns and the settlement of the United States. As transportation improved, more people moved westward into the Great Lakes region and the Midwest, taking advantage of the new economic opportunities that arose in these areas. Towns and cities sprang up along the route, growing rapidly as new industries and services emerged to meet the demands of a changing economy. The canal was not just an economic artery. It also played a critical role in the settling and development of the American frontier. It enabled settlers to more easily access supplies and markets, which encouraged further westward migration. As the country expanded, the Erie Canal played a role in linking newly established regions to established trade routes. 4. The canal's role in U.S. infrastructure and future projects. Inspiration for future infrastructure projects. The success of the Erie Canal was a major inspiration for the creation of additional infrastructure projects throughout the United States. Its completion proved that large-scale, government-backed infrastructure projects could be both successful and profitable. The canal's success paved the way for the development of other canals, railroads, and transportation networks across the nation. The Transcontinental Railroad, which would later connect the eastern U.S. with the West Coast, benefited from the lessons learned from the Erie Canal in terms of construction, financing, and organization. Furthermore, the canal helped to spark the internal improvement movement, which pushed for the development of more transportation networks to facilitate both trade and expansion. A catalyst for the Industrial Revolution in the U.S. As a central piece of the transportation revolution, the Erie Canal played a vital role in accelerating the Industrial Revolution in the United States. By making it easier to move goods, the canal helped to fuel the growth of factories, especially in the Northeast. It also allowed for the movement of raw materials like coal and iron ore, which were vital to manufacturing. The canal's success showed the country that modernization and innovation were possible, and it encouraged further industrial development, leading to the rise of the industrial economy that would dominate the country in the coming decades. A transformative legacy. The opening of the Erie Canal in 1825 was nothing short of transformative. It not only reshaped trade and economic growth in New York State, but also played a crucial role in the economic development of the United States as a whole. By reducing shipping costs and providing a direct link between the East Coast and the Midwest, the canal helped to integrate the American economy and facilitated the growth of industry, agriculture, and settlement across the country. The Erie Canal stood as a monumental achievement in engineering and infrastructure, showing the potential of government investment in long-term economic projects. It also solidified New York City as the commercial capital of the U.S., catalyzed the nation's westward expansion, and set the stage for the industrialization of the American economy. Ultimately, the Erie Canal was not just a waterway. It was a vital force in shaping the course of American economic history, providing a foundation for the nation's growth and positioning it for the challenges and opportunities of the coming centuries.